Alright, hello the internet. My name's Arvid. I'm a Sabre instructor at the Schola Historic Fencing School. Now, recently the fine gentleman Matt Easton posted a video about fighting with sabres versus bayonets. He didn't say very much about it though, so today myself and my schoolmate Alexander, say hi to the internet, Alexander.
Hello internet.
Are going to talk a bit about the advantages and disadvantages of using a sabre against a bayonet and a bayonet against a sabre. First of all, I thought we'd try to introduce the weapons we'll be using. Mine is a Matt Easton model sabre by Peter Regenier, and Alexander's
Is a antique bayonet fencing rifle that were used in the late 19th century on the just over the border to the early 20th century.
by
I actually don't know who made it.
yeah, but who used it?
Oh, the Swedish Army and the German Empire. It's based on a Mauser. So
Okay. So first, the sabre. Now, what are the advantages of using a sabre? Well, first of all, it's a one-handed weapon, which means I have my left hand free to do something else, punch, and above all, grapple, which is very important, which I'll touch on later. I have a basket hilt, which means I have good protection for my sword arm and hand. And also, the sabre, the entirety of the weapon is sharp, which makes it quite difficult for someone to grab my weapon. The sabre is also very much lighter than the rifle and bayonet, which can be both an advantage and a disadvantage. We'll talk more about that later. Now, so the disadvantages of the sabre. Well, first of all, the sabre is a lot lighter than the rifle and bayonet. Now I know what you're thinking. How can this be both an advantage and a disadvantage? Well, the answer is quite simple. The lighter weapon gives me better endurance. It's a lot quicker and easier to work with, and I can fight for a lot longer with a lighter weapon. However, it also makes it very difficult for me to parry and to displace the heavier weapon. I can't just sort of, like you do when you fence, I can't just move my sabre and, block thrusts that way like you do when you fight sabre to sabre. I have to parry with a lot of force and a lot of precision,
and with the right angle.
Which makes it a lot more difficult.
Too flat on an angle and the rifle will go right through the parry.
Now, so the advantages of the bayonet. Well, the first one everyone will say, and the one we thought we'd attempt to debunk a little today, is the range. Now, this is of course very much dependent on which weapon and which bayonet you use. But as we will demonstrate, the range advantage of the bayonet isn't quite what people will think it is. So we're going to show this now. So, as you can see, the bayonet does have a range advantage, but how you hold it and how you have to hold it makes a lot of difference. And basically the weight and the bulk of the weapon means that you have to hold it in a way which means that you don't get as much range as you think you will at first glance. Basically, you nearly have to hold the front hand roughly at the weapon's balance point. Hold the hand too far back, the weapon just becomes too heavy, it'll fall out of your hands. Hold it too far front, the weapon is lighter, but you have to sort of...
Too large movements.
You have to make huge movements just to get a little bit of anything to happen out of the point. As we've already mentioned, the bayonet is a heavy weapon. Or rather, the rifle and bayonet is a heavy weapon. And you have to be quite strong and have quite a lot of endurance to work with it compared to with a sabre. Now, third, the bayonet rifle offers no hand protection whatsoever. Which means that if you screw up even the slightest bit, you will lose your fingers. We'll demonstrate again.
The edge just slide along the rifle, and the rifle itself guided the saber to my fingers and sliced them off.
So, have I left anything out?
Well, what we have shown is the reason why when a bayonet fencer when a bayonet fencer fence against someone with a sword or a saber, you don't stand in the stance that you do with bayonet against bayonet, and that stance that you do stand in with bayonet versus a saber negates the whole point of reach anyway.
Another advantage the bayonet rifle has over the saber is that the bayonet rifle is dangerous at both ends. Now, you can, of course, hit someone with the basket or the pommel of a saber, but it has nowhere near the power nor the usefulness of a stroke to the face with the butt of the rifle. So, to sum up, what can we learn from this? Well, the bayonet is a highly useful weapon. It is not, however, the reach monster most people think of when you sort of think of polearms. But it also has quite a few other advantages, and I know no one would really sort of think of weight as an advantage, but in this case, it works very well. Now, finally, I thought we'd sort of try to settle this once and for all, which is the better weapon, the saber or the bayonet. Now, I would say that it depends a lot on the context. It depends on which weapon, it depends on which rifle or musket, which bayonet. Above all, does the bayonet fencer have the strength and endurance necessary to use his weapon properly?
Or is the one with a saber an officer, or like a general who hasn't seen combat in like decades?
Or has the nobleman with the saber been able to afford good trainers, whereas the kid with the bayonet was just a farmer who they said gave a rifle and bayonet and said stick him with a pointy end. But we also know that this is the internet. This is not the answer you wanted. You wanted to know saber or bayonet, so we thought we'd settle this once for all. Alex, ready?
Yep.
There you have it then. Bayonets win. Thank you.
Thank you.